All right, great. Hi, everybody. I'm honored to be part of this whole New York State amazing effort. I lived in Rochester, as Lon has said, and my mom's still there. She's still alive at 89, and she's going strong. And my sister is in Rochester, so there's still that Adirondacks, New York State, upstate Rochester connection to our family. But I have moved. I'm zooming in from Waltham, Massachusetts. That's where I live now. And normally I would be in. I'd be coming back just about now from a visit to Nicaragua, where I have research, but with the virus, that's all on hold. And so I'm going to talk to you today about a project I did at Brandeis University that I think has some important lessons for anyone who wants to work on wildflower gardening and pollinator support in general. And I have my own set of motivations, and there's a particular set of issues at a place like a university campus. And so every one of these installations will be somewhat its own unique thing. Some of you may even be in the business of doing this or thinking about it for clients. And I hope there's no absolute professionals on, because they're going to be laughing at me with the lessons I had to learn. But I figured someone like me who's been through trials and tribulations might actually be able to share some lessons learned that would be of use to others. I do just want to say that, speaking of experts, probably one of the best things you might get from this half hour with me is, Lon will explain this better, but anyone who wants to reach me later, you can contact Lon and he'll send you my email address. And I have a annotated bibliography of books, and just some amazing books like Pollinator Conservation Handbook. We're living in the golden age of guides for this sort of stuff, Designing Gardens with Flora of the American East. It's a beautiful, beautiful book. And then Attracting Native Pollinators. This is from the Xerces Society. If you haven't heard of the Xerces Society, that's the group that actually is like the World Wildlife Fund for invertebrates, right? They do snails, and they do slugs, and they do bees, and they do butterflies. And how about this? The Bees of Your Backyard. It's just a beautiful illustrated book to the bees and their natural history, and helps you work out. It's not so technical as some of the older, more, there's certainly technical guides to the insects, but that's fairly user-friendly. And in fact, to keep you all glued to your screen, even if I start droning on too long, Lon is going to help with this. We're going to be doing a drawing. I have a little sack of 100 cards, tiny cards, numbered from 1 to 100. I think we have to find the people in the numbers 1 to 54, and we'll draw twice, and whoever gets drawn, your number is going to be the winner. I still have, Lon has to explain a little bit better how he's going to figure out who is number 30, but you'll hear, and it may not this minute, you might not hear this very second. All right, so let me shut up and move on to my my talk. Okay, let's see, here we go. All right. I just need to have one person at least tell me you're seeing my screen just fine.
We can see your screen fine. Looks great.
Great. Okay, here we go. So I'm on the faculty of Brandeis University. I'm retiring this year and moving to Nicaragua as soon as the borders open up again, just a side note. And like I say, free book drawings at end. Lon will officiate. And so there's a lot on this order of service, but just to give you a heads up of where we're headed, just And it looks like that you're going to be here an hour, and actually not. A lot of these are just one slide. So we may just zip through here. So I'm just going to give you a bit of the context, motivations for why I wanted to do this, or why I was motivated to join in. History, a little bit of the history of the project, success, how it came to be, look what we have, lessons learned, and then resources. The resources are more like, what I just showed you, plus the annotated bibliography of articles, organizations that you might want to look into, websites, and I don't know if you've ever heard of Grow Native Massachusetts. That may be something news hasn't gotten out to the New York about Grow Native Massachusetts, but they have a whole library of videos that of their invited speakers that have been great. Doug Tallamy has come twice. One of my favorites is Annie White, who looked at the biological difference between varieties versus native species in terms of their pollination attractiveness and stuff like that. So that's all on this sheet. If you are, like I say, you contact Lon, you can get the annotated bibliography, and we can send you these slides too. We'll send you the whole slides. Okay, so just to give you a heads up ahead of time, the lessons learned, let's go right to those so you knew what's coming. You may encounter a native wildflowers or scruffy looking view. And there may be a tendency or a temptation to use some of the more compact varieties, like the hybrids. And all I can say is that Annie White, professor, I believe at University of New Hampshire, has shown that many of them are not as attractive to pollinators as the straight species. So, some of these native wildflower gardens look a little scruffy, and I don't know, I don't mind it. I think of it as normal. We also learned that if you're working with a thick grass cover, you have to obliterate it. You just have to go like full nuclear and obliterate it. Get a sod cutter and get rid of that grass. You can't just do like, little holes here and there and hope the grass gets shaded out. No, the grass will kill your meadow. Third, learn some phenology. Plan to sequence bloom time if you can, spring, summer, fall. I hate to say it, I love buying seeds. The seed catalogs are so gorgeous. Unless you have time and can really be attentive, and ideally access to a greenhouse, you'll just be a lot happier if you throw some money at this and buy the plants, like at a native plant sale, or order the plants. And finally, include shrubs. We'll get there. So where am I? I'm at the tip of that red arrow. Now I'm over here at that red arrow. You can see we're about 10 miles from downtown Boston. That's the Atlantic Ocean on your far right. And the Charles River is under the other end of the white arrow, wandering along. Here's our campus. And so, there's the interstate, there's the commuter rail, there's busy South Street. We do have a really nice forest, Sacker Woods, and here's the science building, and here's the wedge of land you're going to hear about. So it's about half an acre, and we didn't get the whole thing. There's the whole thing, and we were told, all right, you can have that much. That was our first wildflower meadow that we were allowed to play with, and it was grudgingly given to us, all right? This is what it looked like. For all my 20 years at Brandeis, until we finally put this meadow in, I would see this on my way to work. And this is the hillside. This is what Brandeis thought that, a campus should look like. Very tidy. And talk about, try to find a butterfly or a bee doing anything on that scalped lawn. Good luck. And that's pretty much what the whole campus was, except for the forest. But forests have their own set of insects and wildflowers. They're really great. It's just that it doesn't have quite the burst of color and activity as a meadow does. So how did this all come to be? We went from this to this in 5 years. So this to this. And that's the story I'm going to tell you about. We got that beautiful sign, the Project Pollinator. I say we, but you'll see there's a particular individual that really was the catalyst for this. So, all right. So let's talk about motivations. my motivations were these: beauty, biodiversity conservation, enhance opportunities for Brandeis biology teaching. So beauty, and for me, growing up in the suburbs of Detroit, I used to pester my parents, why can't we move to the country? I want to live in a place like this. And to me, this is beauty. And the diversity of bugs and wildflowers, and you might find a garter snake out there, and there's just a lot of stuff going on. And that was, for me, much more so than a manicured garden. This is what I think of as beautiful. And celebrating native biodiversity, these flowers are just missing from most of the Boston metropolitan area. And instead, we have daffodils and crocuses, and that's all very fine. But I'm just more drawn to this kind of beauty. And then another motivation related to the biodiversity problem is that we don't really understand this yet, and we don't have very many real deep databases on insects. It's not like, the Christmas count for birds, where we've been surveying birds since the 1900s and since the early 1900s. And with insects, who goes out and counts insects? Well, it turns out there are some people that have done this, and now 30, 40, 50 years later, some of them are still alive, and they go back to their research sites, and they're finding that the bugs are gone. And in some cases, this is quite, relatively secure habitat. So we don't quite know what's going on. We've all heard about the honeybee, but the honeybee isn't even native to the US. It just seems to be a general phenomenon that the insects are fading away, and we don't quite know why. But I mean, we've been warring against them for a long time. I found this recently. This is a 1953 New Yorker cover showing a guy spraying this tapestry of, meant to be, of course, all of biodiversity. It was around that time that Rachel Carson came out with Silent Spring. And we began to really be aware of what we were doing. Habitat loss, of course, here's a typical suburban house in Newton, where I used to live for many years. This is the lawn, these are the non-native shrubs, and there's the pavement. So there's not much there to eat for a bee. And the third motivation I had is I teach field biology, and one of my favorite things to teach is this floral choice decision-making by bumblebees, where we actually interview bumblebees with these choices like this. And we've been having to drive 40 minutes to a state park to do it. And so I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could have this, these opportunities. This is just one example of a field biology project you could do if you had a meadow. And so I'll tell you a bit about the history. This guy, I've alluded to him, he was the instigator. And if there's any students online or professors or teachers, just, never underestimate the potential of a student to make things happen. It is really rare, though, that a student actually leaves a legacy of a major change to the campus, especially an undergraduate. They might try to do this. They might try to put in a vegetable garden or something, and the usual response is, who's going to take care of it? You're going to graduate next year. Who's going to take care of it? And they don't have a good answer for that, and it doesn't happen. But what we were trying to do, for one thing, in order to make it happen, he needed a faculty advisor. And so I agreed to be that person. And I said, I'll take care of it. And also I said that, these wildflower meadows, once they're established, if you mow them every few years, and we haven't quite figured out what our schedule is going to be on mowing, we still haven't mowed it. If you mow it every few years, you keep out the trees and you prevent succession, and you can keep a meadow going. There's some caveats there, goldenrod can be particularly aggressive and so on. But anyway, you can keep a meadow going. We still had to get by this guy though. And so if you can imagine this in a Boston accent, he's the groundskeeper for the university. And he goes, there's a fine line between a wildflower meadow and the look of an abandoned lot. It was still one of my favorite quotes. He's a great guy though. He was just very skeptical. he's had to clean up a lot of student projects over the years. So I understand he's the guy who would have to be in charge of this meadow once we all move on, right? And so, but he turned out to be a great supporter, and remember, this is what he thinks it should look like. And so for him to lose this look and risk being criticized for having an abandoned lot on campus when the Board of Trustees visits was a bit of a risk. But remember, we're only working with that little square, right? And he got us a sod cutter. And like I was saying, if you're working with sod, you've got to nuke it. You can't play around. You just have to take the sod and move it out off the site. And so we actually he sent to one of his guys with a sod cutter. And that is kind of a crazy thing. It's like, a bucking bronco, especially since we were on a bit of a slope. But we did get the sod cut, and then you roll it up and you're down to soil. It doesn't take very much soil. It just really removes the sod, which is a great step. And I was really kicking myself because, this is 2016. This is like four years. To this year be the fifth year, right? 16, 17, 18, 19. Yeah, this is the fifth year. And I was looking back on my photographs, and I couldn't find any more photos of the next step. But I've installed another meadow with some other folks, and it looks jumping ahead. This was his plan. And I told him, let's figure out a sequence. So you can see the sequence of blooming here. We're trying to put in wildflowers that will have common milkweed as soon as June. And actually, I've noticed yesterday that the milkweed is just about to pop. Columbine is up, and it's still in the meadow 5 years later. Not very much. It's not an easy one to keep in a meadow. It's so delicate. But you can see the sequence here of bloom time. And we also tried to pay attention to the different pollinator syndromes. Diversity is the key. Different flowers are pollinated by different bugs. Different bugs like different kinds of flowers. So this was just our start on diversity, and we hoped to add as time goes on. And so this is kind of what it looked like. Matt's budget that he won allowed him to buy plants in pots. We didn't try to go from seed. And so, it looks really kind of pathetic. It's just a lot of bare soil, and here and there some scattered potted plants. But, each one of these plants is like $15, right? And so it's expensive to buy them in pots. But that's what his budget allowed. And it turns out it was really smart to buy them in that way. And then this happened. 2016, in July, this rain ended. And we had drought deep into September. The peach growers in this region of Massachusetts just gave up. And they just gave up. They said, okay, it's a lost year. It was an extreme drought year. And I kind of gave up too. I thought, I think we're gonna have to just start over again. And by golly, 2017, I went back in July and things made it through. I was just stunned. I really think that if you buy plants in pots that are already fairly well established, you can get away with a lot. So this summer I bought more plants. Matt was gone. So now it was my baby. I bought more plants and I watered more. Again, that landscaper, he came through. He got me hoses. He got me the key to the hose, to the faucet. And so I watered more, and we got the meadow. We got the meadow going. And this is September. Yeah, this is the summer after our first planting. This is September 2017. The goldenrod and the asters, they're about they're above knee high. You can see there's a few that are higher than that, waist high maybe. This is midsummer 2018, before the asters and goldenrod really took off. Can you see the rest of the meadow is being left unmowed? I didn't ask for that. I think Dennis had made that decision. Anyway, that's what happened. The entire hill was gradually abandoned by the university. It was pretty great. And then stuff happened. You know, things started showing up. It was really, really nice to see. This is 2018. And then this is September 7th, 2019, before the goldenrod and the asters really, really took hold. And this is, what's that, like 6 days later, you can see things are starting to really pop. And you don't see them, but there's just already, it's just covered in bees, mostly bumblebees, but all kinds of non-native bee, or not honeybee, not bumblebee, just smaller native bees, probably some non-native bees, and also some butterflies and a whole bunch of neat stuff, assassin bugs and ambush bugs and great stuff like that. And so this other faculty member who had joined the faculty in the meanwhile, she was very interested in citizen science and bioblitzes, and she arranged a bioblitz. So here it is, September 2019, success. Goldenrod and asters, 6 feet high. This guy, Casey Hayes, professor emeritus, it turns out he's been out in the meadow for the last year and a half photographing things. I never met him before. He's in a different part of the university than I am. He wrote a letter to the president of the university and said, this meadow is so great. Let's turn the whole half-acre into the meadow. And he was like, you know, award-winning professor emeritus, and the president of the university said yes. So we went from that little 600 square feet to a half-acre. It's going to take years to really get, you know, to its full potential. But we had a bioblitz, and a bioblitz is where the students go out with cameras and they take pictures, and then they have to go back and try to identify things. And so this is all photographs taken by the students in 1 hour. And this is the variety of plants we're dealing with: goldenrods, milkweeds, asters. There's a beach rose that snuck in. That's a non-native. We started having non-natives show up and we didn't care, as long as they weren't too aggressive. And as long as things were visiting. You can see the bumblebee is in the beach rose, right? And so it fit right in. Mountain mint turns out to be an amazing plant. It doesn't have a great look. You know, this is not going to appeal to people who think a garden should be just showy, but the mountain mint is a spectacular pollinator plant. This is non-native, but it's in there. Bumblebees sometimes visit it. Another kind of goldenrod. Cow vetch is not native, but it's here and there. The purple coneflower, you can see it's got a beautiful monarch on there. This is an American copper butterfly and a couple of bumblebees hanging out with it. Bumblebee on the common milkweed. The milkweed is completely volunteer. I think we planted a few of them. Mostly we planted butterfly weed, but the milkweed was already coming up. Milkweed can come up through dense sod. I'm really impressed with milkweed. It can handle itself. More of the bugs we found. This is all within 1 hour of the BioBlitz, and all these photographs are by the students with a few exceptions. So it's just teeming. And this is when it really struck me. You know, I looked out from this little patch out at the landscape of Boston and Waltham and Newton and Weston and Wayland and Watertown and all the suburbs around Boston. There's no food. There's no food. The bugs are in this little patch because there's food, and it's barren. We have made the land barren. And so build it and they will come, folks. It's just amazing. Here it is. You know, you saw where we are, right next to the interstate, the commuter rail, busy highways, 10 miles from Boston, and they're still around. They're still around. The bugs are still around. All within an hour. This is what the students photographed. And I got to run my bumblebee behavior lab on the campus. Didn't have to go 30 miles away to the damn state park. All right, so some of the lessons learned. Long-lived perennials like goldenrod, asters, coneflowers, milkweeds, they're not like your ordinary flower. They take time. And growing them from seed is a challenge. I don't know if you've ever seen a goldenrod seed. You practically need a microscope to see the damn thing. And so the seeds are purchased plants. I find it really hard to grow these flowers from seed. I'm not a bad gardener, but it's not been easy. I'm not saying it's impossible, but unless you have time and ideally access to a greenhouse, I really think you should just decide you're going to go to a native plant sale and buy plants. If you want the challenge, I'm not going to say you shouldn't do it. And there is a way to do it. This is what you do. You take milk jugs and you cut them open like this, and you fill them with really good potting soil, and you sprinkle seed on there, and then tape them shut and label them. And you do this in the fall. This you do in the fall. You buy wildflower seeds in the fall. And then you leave them out all winter. This is called stratification. It's called cold condition stratification. Some wildflowers need 3 months of stratification. Some of them need 6 months. But you go from this labeled jug, set them outside. Notice none of the lids are on, so the water can go right in and water your plants. If it gets really dry, you should water them too. You label them, and it's tough. The labels don't last. I've found they fade. So ideally what you do is set them out in order and make a map, so you know what's coming up the next year. And then it looks like this for January, February, March, and then boom. It's really fun. It's really satisfying to see that you do get these tiny, tiny plants. And the goldenrod the seedlings are microscopic. My brother is a forester, and he said, well, how do these plants survive in nature? And I said, I don't think they do. I mean, I think that 1 in a million manages to land in a particularly good year, in a particularly good spot, and it actually turns into a plant. It's 1 in a million. Have you ever noticed how many seeds goldenrod makes? They live for, I don't know, a goldenrod plant seems to live for 30 years, and they make about 5,000 seeds per stem every year. So 30 times 5,000 times how many stems are on the plant, and that's how many seeds they make. So it's telling you there's not goldenrod everywhere. There's a lot of it, but there's not everywhere. And so most of those seeds never make it, and it's hard to get them to make it, even in a little kindergarten like this. Repotting them and getting them to go to the next step, and then setting them out and seeing that they survive to the next year, it's challenging. If you have the time and you really are carefully nurturing them along, you can do it. You just can't compete with these guys. This is the Native Plant Trust greenhouses in the Sami Farm, Massachusetts. These guys are industrial strength wildflower growers, and they're collecting their own seed from the surrounding New England area. I've been to this greenhouse. They have hot pads under the trays. They're cheating. They're giving these plants light and heat like in March and April, and they're getting them to really, and then look at this. This is early June. The plants are huge. My plants, from my little milk jugs, are 5 inches tall by early June. And these guys, look at that. They're already like a year. It's like giving them a year jump. These are like 1-year-old plants, but in fact, they're just a few months old. So you can't compete with the experts. That's what I've decided. Finally, the lesson learned here is include some shrubs. If you really want to have food for the first bumblebees, the queens, right, to come out, including some shrubs is a great idea, because if you think about the things that are providing abundant flowers early, it's things like the dogwoods, the viburnums, a plant called ninebark is in the list. I don't know it very well. Blueberries are blooming at this time of year, shadbush, apples. Nyssa, I was in the campus yesterday, and Tupelo, it's covered in little bees. The flowers don't look at all like anything. No one would consider that, if you didn't look close, you wouldn't even say that tree is not in flower. You wouldn't think it's in flower. The Nyssa was covered in little bees. So dandelions, leave the dandelions, leave the violets. I have a plant out by my back window here called bugle, which is a very difficult plant to control. It tends to spread. but it's got a lot of bumblebees on it. It's not native, so I'm not recommending. I'm just saying that, you know, you have to look at early stuff. On the other hand, remember the life cycle of a bumblebee. The only bumblebees active at this time of year are the queens. The colony doesn't get really big until later in the summer. So when do you really need to feed bumblebees? There's going to be a lot of them in the summer, and then more in late summer, and even more. They're really making their next year queens in September. So they're timed pretty well, actually, with goldenrod and asters. Is anyone listening believe that goldenrod causes hay fever? Can I please ask you to drop that? Goldenrod flowers at the same time as ragweed. And so it's guilt by association. It's criminal. Goldenrod needs better lawyers. People look out their car window and they see the goldenrod blooming and they think, achoo, now that's what's causing my hay fever. Goldenrod has got sticky pollen. Everything that attracts pollinators has sticky pollen. Why would the goldenrod want its pollen to fly in the wind? That wouldn't make any sense. And so please, can we put that aside? Goldenrod is not causing your sneezing. It's just guilt by association. And the last lesson is have patience. A perennial wildflower garden, takes time. You just saw what I went through. I really didn't have enough for students to work with until 4 years later. And I was taught this poem. The first year they sleep, the second year they creep. The third year they leap, unless you have a drought, and then it takes 4. All right, good luck.
Hey, Eric.
Yeah.
So we did have some questions.
Okay.
And in fact, I'm going to let them approach it. We got, 60 people online and another dozen on Facebook right now.
Okay,
so,
all right.
But I know I've been monitoring some chat here a little bit. Alex, why don't you unmute, introduce yourself a little bit. You had a few questions and a few comments.
And Lon, don't forget, I have to do the drawing.
Oh, we'll make sure. Yeah, don't anybody go away, because we're going to be giving some things away. And we got to, I'm still trying to figure out how this is done, but I think I made it up. So I got it. What do you don't want to, is this stuff you don't want to take to Nicaragua with you?
I've got so many books. I'm moving to Nicaragua and I need, this is like a crisis. I bought way too many books in my life. How did I get 2 copies of this? What a dope.
we had,
I forgot I owned it already.
We had Twan Leenders on the other day. He was our speaker on Saturday night.
Yeah.
And I know that you've at least crossed paths in your work in Costa Rica.
I know of his books, and I think I met him once, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. And one of the people that raised questions, in fact, it might be Alex or someone else here. We this afternoon, I guess it was this morning, we had a gentleman, operations manager from Longwood Gardens, talk about prescribed burning.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that Brandeis will not allow you to burn over the grass or whatever the other area was. But Alex, do you want to unmute and ask a couple of your questions?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
So I was just curious on terms of starting a pollinator garden in your own backyard, because I know certain native plants require specific, in terms of sunlight, some are part sun, part shade, some require full sun to grow. And then there's also different pH acidities for soil type that native plants can only grow in, specific conditions. So are there any, certain plants, I guess, that you should plant versus, like down here in Virginia, we have a lot of red clay soil. It's a lot easier, I guess, in terms of the hardness of the soil. It's not like gravel, or it's not like, it's a lot more rich, I guess, in terms of the nutrients. Like if there's certain plants that, I should be planting that are native versus other native plants in terms of the soil acidity, they would grow better or worse versus other plants, I guess.
Yep. Right. Of course, the famous one is blueberries that like it, pH around 6 or lower, a little lower. And sweet soils would be more like 6.5, 7. But yeah, I think blueberries actually are in the 5 range. So you can get a little, you know, if you have a soil test and say you want to grow blueberries, they'll tell you, I think it's calcium sulfate you add or something like that to acidify the soil a bit. But anyway, the main thing I'm going to say is, remember I said at the beginning, one of the best things you'll get from this is a list of books and contacts. So that's what I'm going to say about this one. There's a book by William Collina, and it's going to be on the list. If you send a note to Lon, he'll send you the annotated bibliography. And Bill Collina has written these amazing books on growing wildflowers and ferns and shrubs, all native. And he is just amazing. And they're beautiful, lavishly photographed books as well. So I think that would be my my best thing to tell you. Because if you have shady spots, that's not what I'm doing here. This is a big full sun pollinator meadow. And we didn't do anything with soils. We just figured these are really mostly pretty hardy plants. And that proved to be right. I guess we were lucky. But I'll send you more resources on that question, okay?
All right, thank you.
And also, Alex, you talked a little bit about you know, handling invasives and aliens and things like that. And Eric, you did touch upon it a little bit. That, you know, you kind of had your eyes out for some things. You recognized that they were there, but you know, where I live, I'm like overrun with garlic, mustard, and you know, I've got all sorts of issues. And just wondered what your thoughts were on, you know, at what point does my pollinator garden look like, you know, a field that's been overrun from Europe?
The abandoned lot was the was the caretaker's analogy. So I think partly because we were starting with such thick sod, you know, the places that we haven't eradicated yet of the sod, we actually have very little penetration of invasives. At one end of the hill, we're having this invasive called spotted knapweed coming in, and we just hand pull it. We try to keep up with it hand pulling, and it's well away from our established pollinator garden. And I'll tell you, you know, the grasses and the birdfoot trefoil, which were already there, they tend to encroach on our wildflowers. So what I do each year is I just take a sharp pointed garden shovel, long handled, and I walk through the site, and I'll use my boot and just push back the grass and then, you know, crimp it. And I'll go to the next set of flowers and I'll push back the grass and the trefoil, and I'll crimp it. I don't pull it up. I don't remove the cut stems. I just let them do what they do, compost or whatever on site. And I'm just like, you know, kind of every year giving the wildflowers a little extra growing space. And I hardly have to do it anymore with the really, you know, the really big asters and goldenrod. They're so well established. And here it is May, they're already, you know, getting to be knee high. So you have to do more invasive work early maybe, but once things are really settle in, at least some of the goldenrods and asters can manage pretty well.
Myself helps if I unmute myself. Someone asked a question. Did you use any when you first put the plants in? Again, we had a question regarding tips for, you know, there's someone that's working on a nature center and is putting in a 1,600 square foot pollinator garden. And they found it discouraging at times. Someone else raised the question, did you put any mulch between the plants when they were first planted? So one of the tips obviously is, if you can afford it, go with you know, plants, buy the plants, don't go from seed. But the other thing too was, if you're, is there any mulch activity that you put down to encourage the ones that you just put in and to preserve moisture?
Actually, we didn't. And I think we go back to that point about if you're buying plants in pots and doing at least a minimum amount of watering, you can get away with a lot. And it may have given them a little more growth if we'd protected the soil a little bit better. But that drought, I don't think the mulch would have helped. It was just like, it baked the soil for something like 7 or 8 weeks. No rain. Can you imagine New England for 7 weeks with no rain? It was historic. It was truly historic. And so we didn't use mulch, but I truly think it would have, the soil went dry to, 10, 12 inches. It was astonishing. I'm amazed that anything made it through at all.
We've actually had a couple, as I said, a lot of things that kind of blend together over the course of the weekend. We did, and folks, you can find this on Facebook now, and I'll be posting them to YouTube. We did have not only the prescribed burns from Longwood Gardens management, but also we had a topic on invasive species. So, a lot of these things kind of work together to some degree.
Right.
Any experience growing delicate, less tall natives? Nancy, maybe you want to elaborate on that. Any experience growing more delicate, less tall natives? Not sure. Nancy, are you there? Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit? Or not? Okay.
Okay, I got unmuted.
Okay.
So you had a picture of a little ones that were very small, red. I can't think of the name of it now, but you mentioned that they are in the meadow. They're not columbines, I don't think. They're something else. But there are other like woodland plants too that are not meadow plants, but
Yeah.
I want to establish in my yard.
Yeah.
I have a few. I have Jack in the Pulpit growing and a few other things.
Right.
Solomon seal is very tall, but I'd like to, an area in my yard, I'd like to put a lot of woodland or other delicate meadow. I have shade and I have sun.
Okay. Yep.
Different places that have to be.
Right. So some of my favorite small things are the violets. They tend to be pretty persistent, and they're early. I like that they're early, and they're the host plant for the fritillary butterfly. There are not very many of those, but they are the host plant for the fritillaries.
I have the white and the blue violet.
Wonderful.
I don't have any others.
No, that's great though. They're blooming right now?
Oh no, they bloomed in April.
Oh, right. Okay, very good. So they're early bloomers, right? Do you know pussy toes? You know the little flower called pussy toes?
No, I don't know that one.
You might look at that one. It's not like, showy, but it is a very good early pollinator plant, and it's quite low. I've seen it growing in rock gardens, and it seems to be able to handle quite poor soil, and that's a great one. It's actually, I believe, a biologist recently was on a walk with me, and he mentioned it's dioecious. The famous dioecious is like winterberry or hollies, where you have to have a male and a female of the two. You have to have the two sexes, or you won't get berries. And I believe the pussy toes is dioecious. So I don't know if that means you should buy a whole bunch at once or what. But anyway, that's a good one. And my last thing I'm going to say is I'm going to send you all books by the real experts. And Bill Kalina's book on growing wildflowers does have a whole section on, sun versus shade, woodland, and he lists the height of the plants. So, and then books like this, Designing Gardens with Flora from the American East. I bet you they're in the libraries. Someday the libraries will open up again.
Hey, Eric,
Yeah.
Someone came up with a question, and I kind of get this, is who's going to champion this once you leave? So
fortunately, that biologist who is the BioBlitz person who helped organize the BioBlitz, she's there, and she's in her 40s. She has little kids. I think she's going to be there for decades.
Okay,
so
great.
She's taking it over.
When do you move to Nicaragua, Eric?
I'm trying to move in July.
Okay.
We'll see.
Good luck.
Yeah, thanks.
And just make sure you get a place with an extra room so I can come visit.
Oh,
So-
we're building you a room, Lon. We're building you, it says Lon's room. Yeah.
Perfect.
It has a special bathroom and everything. Yeah.
I don't need a special bathroom.
No, it's special in the terms of a composting toilet. We need you to make a deposit each day, you know. So, and Lon, you did contribute to my my reforestation project. Thank you again.
Yes, I did. Yes, I like to follow you, Eric. So, do we have any other questions? And we do have our drawing.
Oh, yes. All right. Are we ready? Let's see. We have
pick a number, and I'll tell you. I'll tell you whether it's good or not.
Okay. All right. 13.
Oh, that's an easy one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Doreen Barr. Doreen Barr. Doreen, if you would send me an email at virtualanp@gmail. Hopefully you're listening.
I am, and I'm excited. So
congratulations.
All right. I will send you an email with my information.
Correct. That sounds great.
Next number.
All right.
38.
Oh, God, I have to count that high? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. What was it? 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 23. I see a lot of people I know out here. 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33. What was it? 33?
38.
33, 34, 35, 36, 37. And Mitch Paternin, I apologize, Mitch. I've seen you on every one of the videos. Mitch, P-A-T-E-R-N-I-T-I.
Mitch, are you there?
Hey, that's Mitch. Me. How you doing? I'm here.
Doing, Mitch?
Excellent presentation. It's been a lot of fun.
Great. You won a book, dude.
Yeah. Hey.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah. Send me an email at virtualanp@gmail. Virtualanp@gmail, Mitch, and we'll send that out to you. Great. Excellent. All right, Eric.
Thank you very much.
That was what.
Good luck in Nicaragua.
Thanks very much.
Yeah. Hey, that was great.
Oh,
so, if no one else has any other questions, are we set there, Eric?
Yeah, I think so. Just it's been great. This talk, Lon asked me a few weeks ago, but as I've been so busy, I put it all together today. So thank you again for asking me, Lon. And I found some photographs I thought were lost. It's been great. It's been a great thing for me too to look back at this whole project and figure out what happened when.
And Eric, I really appreciate the time that you've spent with us, and certainly as a friend, I'm glad you had an opportunity to come out and participate. So thank you very much.
All right, you're very welcome. We're going to see you in Nicaragua, Lon.
You better. I'll take you up on that. You know that. So
yeah, I'm counting on it.
All right, Eric. We'll see you, and everybody, thank you very much. And this was a great weekend.
Let's hear it for Lon again. Hey, unmute everybody. Let's hear it for Lon again for organizing.
Yay, Lon!
Thank you.
Good job. Thanks. Very good, Lon.
All right, bye, folks.